Trade deadline spectacular. It was one of the greatest trade deadlines we have ever seen. Tons of players on the move. Chubb, Claypool, to go with previous moves we'd already talked about. McCaffrey and Bradley Chubb and Hawkinson and Roquan Smith, and so many players changing teams at the NFL trade deadline. Matt and I will get into all of it and our takeaways on the sellers and the buyers in 2022 coming up right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Not going to be able to get to the mailbag today because there were so many trades. I thought we were going to have two trades to talk about and then talk mailbag and get into some questions that probably revolved around it. But no, we had an unbelievable amount of action at the trade deadline. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we get into any of this, Matt, I want to congratulate you on foresight. Before the season even started, do you remember a fictitious trade you threw out there that you thought would be really beneficial to both teams? And it was the Bears and the Steelers swapping Roquan Smith for Chase Claypool and Devin Bush.
Yep.
I thought it was a great trade. And I was like, you know what, Matt, that is fantastic. I can't even find any holes in it. And lo and behold, Chase Claypool is now a Chicago Bear. I want to start with Chicago.
And Roquan isn't.
And Roquan is not, right? And unfortunately for the Bears and the Steelers, maybe they should have done this deal a lot sooner. That could have helped the trajectory of both of their seasons, perhaps. But I actually like for the Steelers how this ended up maybe even better because of the pick they got back for Chase Claypool. The Bears obviously moving Roquan Smith. That was a move we had talked about already on yesterday's podcast. It was done before the deadline. And, the Baltimore Ravens, and we talked about the pluses and minuses there. I thought it was a good move, a prudent move for the Bears. I'm not sure why they needed to wait so long if teams maybe just didn't come calling before the season started. But then they made a move as a buyer as well, going to the Steelers to pick up Chase Claypool, wide receiver, has one more year left on his contract for a second-round pick. And the pick they gave up, which is key here, wasn't the pick they got from the Ravens for Roquan Smith. They gave up their own second-round pick. And apparently the Packers were poking around on this, offering their pick. Both those teams, the Bears and the Packers, surprisingly at 3 and 4. But in the end, the Steelers probably wisely thought, I think the Packers probably end up with the better records of the Bears' second-rounder is better than the Packers' second-rounder. I think that's accurate, but that's a lot for the Chicago Bears to give up for a player who only has 1.5 years left on his contract. And how about the first half of the season where Justin Fields could have really used somebody like Chase Claypool, where teams just not willing to sell before the deadline? But Matt, you eventually got this mostly right. So congratulations to you. And the first thing I got to ask you is, what are the Bears getting in Chase Claypool? Is he a number one? Is it worth it to send a pick that's potentially in the high 30s here? We're talking early in the second round. This pick could be top 5, top 10 in the round, because you can get a lot of really talented players in the draft on a 4-year rookie contract, but you're getting a veteran with only 1 year left on the contract. So what do you think about this trade of the Bears going and getting Chase Claypool, and who are they getting in Chase Claypool?
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. I think they were talking about either their early third or that Ravens second, and the Steelers were considering it. And then Green Bay comes in and said, we'll give you our second. Well, okay. And then I think the Bears said, well, we'll give you our second. And I think it's an overpay. I mean, as a Steeler person, I'm super excited about it. I think they got $1.50 for $1, in return. And Claypool's a good player. He'll help them. But now the Steelers pretty much are pretty close to assured to having 3 picks in the top 45, which never happens in my lifetime. It's going to be awful fun, all the possibilities you can go down the road. Claypool's big and fast. He's inconsistent. He's played better and better as the season's gone on. Most of his success before this year is an outside guy. They moved him into a big power slot role with mixed results, but I mean, his quarterbacks and situation hasn't helped him either. The misconception is, oh, he's going to go up and high point the ball and he's a rebounder. He really isn't. I mean, he plays much smaller than he is. He's good on the move. A little disappointing, but they weren't going to pay him in a year and a half. They just paid Deontay Johnson. They're looking at Pickens already saying, well, we're going to pay him, so we're not paying somebody in between. Austin could take that role next year. I'm sure they'll draft one. They have a really good draft history, of course, with receivers. And a big factor here, I bet, with the Bears' perspective was, hey, we have $100 million in cap space. But if you look at the upcoming free agent receiver class, it kind of stinks. Like, I can't go buy one. So
they all got swallowed up already.
Yeah, right. So I might as well get the extra, 8 or 9 games with Fields, make his life a little easier. These guys can build a rapport, and he's a lot different than Mooney. But I do think they overpaid.
I agree. So we'll look at it when the Steelers are on the clock with that second-round pick now and look at the wide receivers available and think, man, would the Bears have been better off drafting one of these guys? But you don't have to wait for the development either.
Right.
You have a player you can plug in that is a starting caliber player on the outside who wanted more go balls in the Steelers. And, hey, Justin Fields, if there's one thing he can do is throw a pretty dang good deep ball. So maybe we'll see some more explosives there for Chase Claypool as the starting receiver over there for the Chicago Bears. And yeah, you look at ahead for the Steelers, you got your Z in Deontay Johnson, you got your X, like prototype X in George Pickens, and then you got Calvin Austin in the slot, who unfortunately he's going on IR for the year. That was an odd
he's
one.
out for the year, right?
I thought he said he was going to be ready to go, so I don't know if they just maybe they would have not done that.
Well, he hasn't practiced since like the first couple of days of training camp, so they didn't really know what they had in the guy, and they didn't want to cut one of their receivers, so they pretty much just said, well, you're gonna have to wait till next year.
Yeah, I wonder if they knew that they were going to trade Claypool if they would have not done the IR route. So they would be able to plug him in at this point now. Yeah. But yeah, he would be a nice slot. So you've got your perfect combination of guys there, and I'm sure he'll get some competition there potentially in the draft, maybe with that second-round pick by the Steelers, who are so good at plucking wide receivers in the draft. So that's the Pittsburgh Steelers also made another move, Matt. William Jackson going from Washington to Pittsburgh, swapping 6th and 7th. So almost nothing there, but adding some. Is that a long-term move? Do the Steelers
maybe?
The Steelers are still playing for something, right? I mean, they're not like the fact that they sold a wide receiver doesn't mean that they're tanking at this point.
Here's the history with William Jackson. They loved him coming out of school. They had a big cornerback need. They thought there was a very good chance he would be their first-round pick. Bengals grab him right before the Steelers pick. They settle for Artie Burns. That doesn't go well. William Jackson goes to the Bengals, was coached by Calvin Austin, the current Steeler defensive coordinator, and the Steelers played against him twice a year, and they've adored him ever since. He became a free agent. They put a good offer in for him. Washington, frankly, overpaid him. He went to Washington, played a lot more zone than man. He's more of a man guy, but he's 30 years old. All it is cap space, and you could cut him tomorrow, and it won't cost you a thing. They're trying to figure out Witherspoon, Wallace, Sutton, and Jackson, and I assume Jackson will go right into a starting spot, and they're hoping they find their next Joe Hayden.
Yeah, my guy Eric Crocker talked to me about that off the air from the Locked On 49ers podcast, and he's a former DB, and he's like, yes, fits sometimes it's not good. Yeah. And, Nnamdi Asomugha was the famous one, played one way with the Raiders, big-time free agent. They asked him to do something else. It didn't work out. And something like 16 of 19 completions for 140 quarterback rating or something like that into William Jackson's coverage this year. So definitely wasn't working there. We'll see if they can figure it out with the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. So big moves there for the Bears and the Steelers. Moving on, another very active team was the Miami Dolphins. Bradley Chubb going from the Broncos to Miami. Tons of other moves as well to break down on this trade deadline special, which was a lot more active than I think we expected. Tons to get to on today's program. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spiked nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off. Let me see that again. 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy an advanced security and enhanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. And the reasons to love Simply Safe are simple. You can make a custom system, any sort of wide variety of high-tech sensors on any door, any window you need. A crystal clear HD live stream of your security cameras, so you know what's going on when you're inside the house. On the outside, you know what's going on at home when you are not there. And of course, in an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system we recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. This is their biggest discount of the year, so do not wait. That's simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Miami Dolphins, busy in this one, adding a couple of players at the NFL trade deadline. Matt, the greatest trade deadline of all time?
Oh, yeah. Flurry of activity, some big names, double the amount of trades in any other day in NFL history, except for draft day, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, it's a blast.
And even leading up, it was one of the best ones just from like the previous week of trades. And it sort of like gained momentum. And then on the day, you saw so many moves up to the deadline, which we had really never seen before. And so that was so much fun. The Miami Dolphins, a big part of that, being active. They have been active with tons of trades. And now, Matt, the Trey Lance trade up has been completed because that was the last pick that the Dolphins got from the 49ers, 3 consecutive years of first-round picks. And they ended up with Jalen Waddle. They traded for Tyreek Hill and now trade for Bradley Chubb. That's pretty darn big impact for those 3 draft picks. Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and now Bradley Chubb. What are your thoughts on Bradley Chubb for a first-round pick going to the Miami Dolphins from the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, and if you didn't cheat, you'd still have your own first-round pick. So there's that factor. I never loved Chubb. I always thought of him as a 1B type of guy. You know, I mean, he did great work when Von Miller was on the other side. But he's having his best year, in my opinion. I mean, I think he's been a real difference maker for those guys. Strong versus the run, powerful guy. Nice addition for sure. I mean, Miami's very aggressive right now. You mix him in with Phillips and Ingram and Ogba. I mean, you could put a NASCAR package together with those guys as well. You know, Wilkins. They have a good front. And their defense is built on blitz and leaving corners on islands, but their corners that they're counting on aren't there, Jones in particular. So maybe we'll blitz less and make our corners' life a little easier. It's a lot to give up. I think it's a good deal for Denver, considering all the, they need to kind of step back there. And I'm shocked they didn't trade Hamler or Judy or somebody like that as well to get even more picks. I don't think Chase Edmonds mattered, to be very honest with you. My hunch is it's almost like a fantasy trade, and it's a total hunch by me, is Miami's probably like, hey, we're going to make a deal for Jeff Wilson as well. In order for this to work, you have to take Edmonds off our books. We never should have signed him. He was never a good fit here. I'll throw him in, and Denver might look at it like, we'll take a chance on him. We get a little bit of cap space. Maybe we get something out of him.
Right. They lost Javonte Williams, so you get a capable running back, and the Dolphins now can reunite Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson.
Yeah,
with their former running game coordinator, now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins in McDaniel. So a nice little 1-2 there. And, Jeff Wilson can do a lot of what Chase Edmonds did and give you some short yardage. He's a powerful guy, runs hard, can catch the ball a little bit out of the backfield. Raheem Mostert, obviously the guy with the big speed and the big plays. So I like the moves from the Miami Dolphins perspective. And with the Denver Broncos, again, the Packers sniffing around, and the Packers aren't the type they're a draft and develop team, right? And I know there was some questions in the mailbag that we're not gonna be able to get to, but we can kind of cover this now because the question was, Packers shouldn't be surprised because the Packers aren't making moves, right? Because they never make moves. And I think they tried, but they're not going to ever be the type of team to overpay. And the Broncos were like, you have to give us first rounders for Chubb and for Judy. And the Packers, I assume, were willing to, and according to some reports, were willing to do that second round pick that they offered for Claypool for Jerry Judy. And the the Broncos wanted more. They wanted an overpay. They ever wanted a 1 or another pick to go along with the second, and the Packers aren't the type of team to do that. They'll say, no, we'll develop and we'll draft again. And that's how the Packers roll. So I think that's why we saw, only certain players get moved at the deadline, because the teams have to be willing to pay, and a lot of GMs aren't just going to give guys up for nothing.
Yeah, and I meant to mention this from a Denver perspective as well for this trade. They still have Randy Gregory, high-quality player, a little volatile. They used a second-round pick on Nick Bonito. And one of my favorite, emerging players is Baron Browning. Like, he's not Micah Parsons, but he's linebacker turned to edge. And I think we're going to see more of these conversions. Great athlete. He's a really good player. So they're not short on edge rushers. That was something they actually had a little bit of a surplus on, turned that into picks. And you're right about the trade stuff. I mean, and if you're Green Bay and you're really being honest with yourself, isn't a first-round pick probably more valuable than Jerry Jeudy or a second-round pick than Hamler, considering where you're at? You're not going to win it all this year.
I totally agree. Right. And wide receivers can take a little longer than maybe, say, a pass rusher or a running back or certain positions to really get the system, get involved, build that chemistry with the quarterback and in the passing game. So some of those things can take a little bit of time, and you might not even be really firing on all cylinders with Aaron Rodgers until late in the season anyway. And is this team even going to the playoffs? We'll find out. But I would have loved to see Jerry Jeudy in Green Bay. But unfortunately, Packers were not able to get one of those moves done. How about, I didn't even know you could trade suspended players. Did you know that?
Well, that's the weirdest trade I've ever seen.
Right.
I'm still not sure what Atlanta's getting back.
So the way I understand it, the Atlanta Falcons, in return of trading wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who is currently suspended by the league, to the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Jaguars, if Calvin Ridley turns out not to really play, then they're giving up
I know the minimum Atlanta gets a 5th-round pick next year.
So it's a 5th rounder and like a 6th or 7th. And then at maximum, if Calvin Ridley does play, then the compensation package would be a 2024 2nd rounder and a 2023 5th rounder. So the 2023 5th rounder is part of it. The question is, the next draft, does the 2024 2nd rounder go to the Falcons or not? And that depends on what Calvin Ridley does for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I don't mean to correct you, but I think it was more this way, is they're definitely getting a 5th next year. But if they extend him, they get a 2nd, or something about it. That's where I'm screwed up, because it's something to do with a contract extension hurts the Jags in this process. So if he's good and you love him and you extend him, you don't get as much the next year. You get a 4th instead of a 2nd or something along those lines. Again, it's the most confusing trade ever.
Yeah. Or it might be a 6th instead of
maybe
a 2nd. But
it's a big difference, but re-signing him is key.
Okay.
So if you hate him and you don't re-sign him, you get a good pick. If you love him and you re-sign him, you don't get a good pick.
For Atlanta, you mean the Jaguar. If the Jaguars re-sign him and love him, then Atlanta gets the 2nd-round pick from the Jaguars.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I said that wrong. You're 100% right. So it costs you more draft pick-wise to keep him.
Yes, right. Yes. But that would mean that trade was good and you liked him and you keep him, and it ends up being a 2nd-rounder. Right. And it's a good way for the Jaguars, because it'd probably be hard for them, like they saw and part of this is probably what they saw last offseason, how hard it was. They had to overpay for guys to come in as free agents anyway. So they used the trade market instead. And then you could still draft some guys as well to try to get those wide receivers over there. And Calvin Ridley, if everything's right, is a number 1 guy for you.
Yeah, I love it from the Jags' perspective. And he was never really in Atlanta's equation. There was all kinds of, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that he was going to get traded before he got suspended. Then, of course, nobody wanted to. Not only the conditions super weird, though, but this didn't have to happen at the trade deadline. This could have happened 3 months ago or a month ago or 2 weeks ago. Like, I don't know why all of a sudden the trade deadline, we had to get Calvin Ridley. He's not going to play this year. But you put him with Kirk. Now you have 2 legit guys. I don't want to say it's the same level of A.J. Brown for Hurts or Tyreek for Tua, but this is becoming a common thread with, highly drafted quarterbacks. Go get them a legit dude. And I think Calvin Ridley's very legit.
Nyheim Hines going from Indy to Buffalo. We'll get into that and the rest of the trade deadline action next. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. What do you love about Prize Picks? Well, first of all, it is super easy, and you can make up to 10 times your money on any entry. How easy? Well, entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. All you do is you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, boom, you win. And you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry if you're picking those 5 players and you hit them all. You're not competing against other people either. It's just you versus the projections that are available at Prize Picks. For example, if you want to bet on this weekend's games, you want to bet on the Thursday nighter, then you pick a couple of players. You pick 2 to 5 players. You say, okay, I want to go more on passing yards here. I'm going to go less on rushing yards here. And if you hit them, then you win. And Prize Picks projections are not just about NFL football, although there are tons of projections for the NFL. You can find NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, golf, college sports, motor sports, combat sports, MMA, boxing, everything, you name it, you can find projections at Prize Picks. Withdrawals are safe and fast, and currently Prize Picks is operational in 30 states and Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50 more to play with. Don't forget, enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. I think one of the biggest stock downs now after the trade deadline, Matt, is James Cook. The Bills spent a pretty high draft pick on this guy to be a pass-catching phenom out of the backfield, give them another look, and apparently they are not liking what they're seeing. They haven't utilized him hardly at all this year except for some garbage time, and now they've just traded for a guy that has the exact same skill set, but the veteran version in Nyheim Hines from the Indianapolis Colts. And Zach Moss, who also has been sort of, I don't want to say bust is not necessarily the right word, but has never really, been the guy they hoped he would be. So Zach Moss and a conditional 2023 6th-round pick, not a lot going to Indy for running back Nyheim Hines.
Yeah, I think it's worth it for the Bills. Real quick, Ryan and I on Locked On Dynasty broke down all these fantasy relevant ones. And it's funny because just last week we were talking about James Cook, dynasty-wise, thinking, I'm not nervous yet. He fumbled his first time. Now we're nervous. This is not a good sign for James Cook at all. But, the Bills are funny to me in a way because they were rumored to be interested in McCaffrey way back when. They had McKissick sign. He backed out of it. Then they go trade for Cook, or then they draft Cook high. Now they're trading for Nyheim Hines. They have this plan in place for a true receiving back. But my hunch is when it's all said and done is they won't use them that way. They'll keep doing what they do and we'll score 50 points a game. Why is this great need to change what you're doing? Allen will still run for 40 or 50 yards a game. He'll be the short yardage back. Maybe they dump a couple to Hines here and there, but it's not like they needed them. But they've had this bug up their butt about a receiving back now for a year, and now they got one. I wonder if Moss, kind of like with Edmonds, was, hey, how about we just throw him in? Because if we bring in Hines, we're going to cut Moss. You want him too. And I guess he's a suitable backup to Taylor. Change of scenery could do him good. I liked him coming out of school too.
Yeah, kind of just a short yardage guy. And I guess you got Deion Jackson there. So if you have to go 1-2 punch, you kind of have a situation. I don't know. I don't really get the Hines trade from the Colts perspective. I don't think they really got much back.
I have a theory on this though. You remember in Moneyball when the coach wanted to play somebody?
Yeah, Scott Hatterberg.
Exactly. And what's his face? Bean is like, well, no, you got to play this dude. So he just traded Hatterberg or traded whoever the other one was to give him no option.
Carlos Pena. Yeah, he trades Carlos Pena. He's like,
there
well,
you
you
go.
can't put Carlos Pena in the lineup because we traded him.
Exactly. We got to pick for him. So quit throwing the ball to Hines. Give the ball to Jonathan Taylor 1,000 times, and we're going to trade him so you don't have any more options.
There you go.
That's my theory on it.
I like that theory a lot, actually. Let's look at, so those are most of the big trades. There's some other moves that happened before or after the deadline. Is there any other trades that you really want to cover here? Because I kind of want to get your thoughts on maybe teams that you thought nailed this or maybe that made some mistakes when it comes to the trade deadline.
I mean, this is just throw it out there. Dean Marlowe, they've had a lot of safety injuries for the Bills while we're talking about them, and they're familiar with them. Fine. Go get them for nothing. I mean, that's not a big deal. I'm scanning them now. Oh, the Broncos also got Jacob Martin. I mean, because that's sort of noteworthy considering they traded a D end, an edge guy, and they brought another one back. So it makes some sense. Didn't hardly give anything up for him. I did like the Ridley deal a lot. I think Wilson, we've seen Wilson and Mostert together. We know exactly what that looks like, and it'll work perfect for that system. I think that's it. Scanning these deals here. I mean, we talked about
Hawkinson yesterday. That was a big one. And for those that don't remember what the exact terms were, the Vikings acquired TJ Hawkinson, a 4th-round pick next year, and a conditional 4th in the following season, 2024 draft, and they gave up to the Detroit Lions a 2nd-round pick in 2023 and a 3rd-round pick in 2024. That's ultimately not a ton to give up. You drop down basically 2 rounds in the 2023 draft and a round in 2024 for TJ Hawkinson, who could make a nice impact for your football team. So I like that move for the Minnesota Vikings. I like a lot of the moves for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah,
I just don't like that now with the 1st-round pick of their own that got taken away, and then the other 1st-round pick that they just spent on Bradley Chubb. They have no 1st-round picks left now, so you're really in it to win it. So they got to go win some football games and really go far this year to really feel good about the trades that they made, because they can't. It's gonna be tougher for them to add impact in the offseason.
So this presents a question I want to talk about too. Is I don't think Miami is. I know they beat the Bills, but I don't think they're in the Chiefs-Bills class in the AFC. But they're intriguing. They're hard to play against. Their defense has got a little bump. Are they 3rd in the AFC in your opinion? I mean,
I think they're one of those.
Great.
Yeah. I think they're definitely in the conversation. They're right there with, we talked about
Baltimore,
Cowboys and the Vikings.
Yeah.
And for power rankings, the 4th best team in the league. There's a number of teams that you could argue. I think the Miami Dolphins are right there. So I think they are fighting for that 3 spot. And then you get into the tournament, and anything can happen.
Right. I mean, they could, the Chiefs or Bills could get knocked off by someone, and before you know it, Miami's in the AFC Championship game, and they got a shot, and it's been a successful year.
Absolutely. Kadarius Toney, Andy Reid talking about how, he's picked up things pretty quickly, but there's one football and a lot of guys to get it. So either Kadarius Toney's not going to be a big part of it, and that's just they're just trying to see if they find something, can get a 3rd round, a dynamic wide receiver for a late 3rd that sticks around for a few years there. Maybe it's more about next year, or that means that he's going to be heavily targeted in this upcoming game because Andy Reid's downplaying it during the bye week. So we'll see what happens there with Kadarius Toney and the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm looking at the Bears.
I'm psyched about that one, though. I mean, I'm sure Reid has a plan.
Yeah, I want to see how that usage is for sure. And I think this is them trying to say, hey, this is a 1st-round athlete. Can we get that for a 3rd and not have to spend all this on wide receivers and try to figure out that going forward and replace some of the dynamic ability from Tyreek that we lost? And I'm looking at the Steelers. Steelers are a big winner. I think
they're a huge winner. Yeah,
getting a high 2nd-round pick for Claypool when they've got players that they drafted and are developing behind them to just plug right in. So that. And from the Bears' perspective, man, so the Bears traded Roquan Smith, Robert Quinn, got back Claypool, and
down significantly in the 2nd round,
and then downgrade in the 2nd round. I would have liked to see a lot.
And
more.
I think they got a 4th and 5th too.
Yeah, so they got some mid-round stuff. I would have liked to see a lot more high-end draft picks for what they gave up and what they got back. So kind of C plus. I like that they're trying to do something there, but we'll see. Claypool has to be a legit stud on the outside for them for that one to make a lot of sense. And then you got to pay him a lot too, because he's only got 1 year left. So I look at a high 2nd-round pick, what that player could be at wide receiver long-term, a 4-year rookie contract. Claypool better be good.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be worth that. I think he'll be a starter, but I don't think he'll be worth that. And I don't think he'll advance or make Fields' career that much more significant than a 2nd-round pick would have or whatever. But I was shocked the Steelers got that in return.
49ers, we'll see. They gave up a lot of picks. They got 1 5th-rounder back for Jeff Wilson. Eli Mitchell's coming back, so they should be good at running back.
Yeah, they're fine.
If Christian McCaffrey's as dynamic as he looked last week, that trade might look better than I suspected it would have been, because he's a lot more than a running back. And you know how I don't like paying for running backs.
Sure. Yeah, so. And he's a nice pickup for the Dolphins, too. I mean, Wilson plugs right in.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Matt and I back tomorrow. We're going to start previewing week 9 right here. Peacock and Williamson.